Some of the work of this third pop artist, Wayne Thiebaud. He was born in 1920 and grew up in Long Beach, California, beginning in high school as a cartoonist, poster artist, and set designer for his school theater productions. He also worked for a brief time as an animator for the Walt Disney Studios. He took jobs as a commercial artist in his 20s, but then returned to school in Sacramento, California, where he received his teaching credential and taught art at the local community college. In the early to mid-50s, Wayne Thiebaud painted some still lifes of post-war store window displays and meat counters, and then consistently painted in the pop manner into the 1960s, pies, cakes, gumballs. However, Northern California art patrons ignored his work until his paintings were included in an important New York exhibit. Wayne Thiebaud's self-portrait shows something of his solid character and his painterly style. Thiebaud later developed his talents with figural paintings, then cityscapes of San Francisco and rural landscapes. Almost from the beginning of the pop art movement, Wayne Thiebaud became famous for these pictures of pies in glass cases. This one, simply called Pies, was painted in 1961. It shows America's love of mass production and the abundance associated with consumerism. The artist spreads out an apparently limitless array of pies, arranged in cafeteria rows according to flavor. By intensifying his colors, Thiebaud created volume without using traditional shading techniques. Cast shadows separate the plates from one another on a neutral background. And by showing only parts of the pies at the edges of the painting, he suggested an endless repetition. Wayne Thiebaud claimed that he painted all of these cafeteria subjects from childhood memories. Nothing is more pop than the gumball dispensers seen in Wayne Thiebaud's three machines, both because they can be found everywhere in American life and their bright colors. The famous machines are shown from the front in three slightly different ways, isolated against a plain background in the standard pop way of repeating images. He indicated a third dimension, however, by cast shadows and obvious brushwork. A closer look reveals Thiebaud's special techniques of making colors look vibrant. Around each object, he painted a thin line of a complementary color. Can you see what colors he used for these halos? And how he made the candy gum appear like round balls. Wayne Thiebaud also painted pictures of people. His first figural paintings showed people in the manner of his other pop art subjects, frontal, stark, and detached, almost frozen in space. But in his later years, he painted figures in action, as in this one called Two Players. We can see two young athletes scrimmaging on the field, their legs and arms forming diagonals that imply movement. Yet their bent bodies create a solid block in the foreground of the picture space, reminding us of the bold forms of his pies and gumball machines. The colored outlines are there, but they're more subtle in this later work. Here is a scene familiar to anyone who has gone to a delicatessen or a cafeteria. Against a white background and foreground rests a countertop of lunch items. The title of the painting is Salads, Sandwiches, and Desserts, and what you see is what you get, plate after plate of identical offerings. We have the feeling that the array could go on forever repeating these same limited choices: avocado halves, cold sandwiches, puddings and pies, on and on. Only in the very smallest details is there variety. Avocados turned in different directions, several different kinds of pies. Just enough variation to avoid complete monotony. Who is this artist who plays with food? Of course, Wayne Thiebaud. One of a series called Endangered Species, this painting, called San Francisco Silver Spot, is one of the more colorful creations of this pop artist. On a background of navy blue, we see a pattern of bright green grass and a brilliantly marked butterfly. The colors on the body and wings actually have no resemblance to the markings on the real butterfly, a small insect whose limited environment is a very few acres on a California hillside. But the artist has captured the idea of the silver spots by using confetti-like colors, including a very pale blue for the silver. Notice, too, that he is not bothered with symmetry, only suggesting the fragility and fluttering nature of this tiny creature. Can you name the artist? Yes, Andy Warhol. This painter's commercial art background affected the way he handled his subject matter. In this picture, Candy Counter, he has heightened the intensity of the colors. The green and orange candies seem to pulse with an unusual brightness, as in advertising art. Bands of contrasting color on the edges create a flicker like the fluorescent light of a candy shop. He virtually frosts the canvas to suggest the stickiness of caramel or the soft ripples of fudge. Additional sugary treats are isolated in the cool environment of their glass case, appearing as works of art in themselves. Enticing multicolored lollipops are balanced by the scale on the top. Who else could have offered us this assortment of mouth-watering candies? Only Wayne Thiebaud. By now, you have seen several typical examples of the artwork of three major pop artists and have learned how to identify their particular styles. To give yourself a final review, look at the next three pictures and say who is the artist of each. Wham is close to the original comic strip in appearance, yet the artist has made it very imposing by enlarging it to over 13 feet in length. It is not really a picture of war itself, but a painting of a comic strip about a war episode. And looking at a comic book image is different from experiencing the actual event. Even the bright colors separate us from a true air battle scene. Notice the dialogue balloons and the dot patterns of newspaper reproduction. Can you name the artist? You're right, Roy Lichtenstein. In this painting, called Cakes, the artist smears thick brown oil paint to imitate chocolate frosting and forms a perfect rosebud on top of a delicate pink cake. The two angel food cakes, the only two exactly alike, seem plain white, but actually have been painted with strokes of orange, sky blue, beige, and putty, offset with lavender shadows. The artist has frosted the frosting. Notice how the cakes rest on plates held high above the shelf on spindly stems, allowing elliptical shadows to make the pale blue shelf more interesting. Most pop art is fast and easy to see at a glance. This artist's work is slow, requiring time to take a closer look and check out the subtle details. Do you know the name of the artist who frosts his cake with such luscious oil paint? Yes, Wayne Thiebaud. Here is a familiar sculpture presented as a 6-foot square printed image, the Fabi's Statue of Liberty. Done after pop art's popularity had diminished, it presents the famous statue as a camouflaged object. This picture is one of a series of large prints done in different colors. It shows a blue and lavender statue against a neutral cloudy sky. In the foreground, we can see a part of an American flag and the word Fabi's. It leaves the viewer with many questions about its meaning. Of course, you have identified this famous pop artist as Andy Warhol. With the passage of time, it appears that pop artists were powerful and genuine innovators. Their imitations of mass media were discriminating, and they documented an age. Andy Warhol's repeated images of celebrities, disasters, processed articles, and food were taken from American culture at that time. Roy Lichtenstein slowed down comic strip images by enlarging them and making us see how they were created. Wayne Thiebaud called attention to our obsession with food and other elements of mass culture. All three moved on to other forms of expression, developing and expanding their creativeness in new ways. Though pop art became only one important art movement among the many competing ones that succeeded one another in the late 20th century, it had made its mark on the art world. You can find many examples of the pop artist's work in books and other media, and you will enjoy discovering original pop art in museums, galleries, and private collections.